Professor Chomsky, you have touched the topic of Russia, and may I ask you about your current view on the situation in Ukraine, Russia, Crimea, and reaction of the U.S. government or EU towards the situation there?
Well, the invasion and annexation of Crimea is in violation of international law. It's in violation of explicit treaties to which Russia was a party, to observe the borders of Ukraine, no doubt about that. It's not the only such case in the world. There are much worse cases. We don't talk about them because they're our crimes, but they exist. So think about them. Take, for example, just to take the most obvious, which would be on the front pages if there was anything like a free press. Take, say, the U.S. takeover of eastern Cuba. Okay, it was taken at the point of a gun. There's a treaty, but it was under military occupation. So Cuba was forced to hand over eastern Cuba to the United States. It's what we call Guantanamo. It's a big part of southeastern Cuba. Includes Cuba's major port and any real hope they have for trade and development. The U.S. has held it for over a century. When Cuba got its independence in 1959, they asked to have it back. U.S. refuses. For over 50 years now, the U.S. has refused Cuban efforts to get that part of their territory back. The U.S. has no justification for this. No strategic interest, no historical connections, nothing except one thing. It helps, it contributes to the U.S. policy of undermining Cuba's hope for independent development. That's it. It's part of the policy of economic warfare, of terrorist activity, and so on. Otherwise, nothing. I mean, the Russian actions in Crimea are criminal, but they have a much stronger case than the U.S. has in eastern Cuba. And there's other cases. Take, say, Israel. Israel has annexed the Syrian Golan Heights. That's in explicit violation of Security Council orders, not only in violation of international law, but in violation of explicit orders of the Security Council, ordering them not to do it. Take what's called Jerusalem. Jerusalem today has almost nothing to do with anything that was ever Jerusalem. It's about 5 times as big as historic Jerusalem. Israel's annexed it in violation of explicit Security Council orders. Take what Israel's doing in the West Bank, all the settlement and infrastructure developments, all in violation of international law. It's not debatable. I mean, the Security Council, the International Court of Justice have all ruled on it. They can do it because the United States backs it. And that's the way power works in the world. So there's that. And we can continue. The Turkish occupation of northern Cyprus. There's many other cases. So sure, it's a criminal act. Should be condemned in the context of recognition of what's going on. First of all, in comparison with others that we're responsible for. And also because Russia does have claims, unlike the U.S., say, in eastern Cuba. I'm sure you know the background. Khrushchev just handed Crimea over to Ukraine in 1954. He never asked the population, and the population was not in favor of it. There were referenda much earlier, early 90s, which came out about the same as the recent referendum. Russia's only warm water port is in Crimea. It's their main naval base. It's got long historic connections and so on. So it's a criminal act, but there are arguments for it, unlike, say, the U.S. and Cuba. Furthermore, there's a history. If you take a look at what's the EU, U.S., and Russian actions now, if you read the press or you listen to government pronouncements, there's a lot of condemnation of the fact that Russia is carrying out military maneuvers near the border of Ukraine, but inside Russia. At the same time, the U.S. is carrying out military maneuvers in Poland and the Baltic states, right? That would be analogous to Russia carrying out military maneuvers in Mexico and Canada. Okay, but we don't condemn that. And there's a principle. The principle is we own the world. And if any country is doing something, even in its own territory, that we don't like, that's illegitimate. But if we're doing something anywhere in the world, it's legitimate. That's kind of a fundamental imperial principle accepted in much of the West without any question. And there's also a history that's not obscure. Right after the Berlin Wall fell, 1990, Mikhail Gorbachev, made a pretty astonishing offer. He offered to allow Germany to be unified and to join a hostile military alliance, NATO. You should take a look at the history of the preceding century, and you can see what that was. I mean, I don't have to tell you, it's obvious. There was a quid pro quo. This is the U.S. government, that's President Bush and his Secretary of State, James Baker, they agreed not to let NATO move, the phrase was, 1 inch to the east, meaning to East Germany. They pledged that NATO would not move to East Germany. That was the quid pro quo. Immediately, NATO moved to East Germany. Gorbachev was outraged, and the U.S. government simply informed him, it's not on paper, it was only a gentleman's agreement, and if you're dumb enough to accept our word for something, it's your problem. So then Clinton came in right afterwards and extended NATO further to the east, all around the border of Russia. It's a military alliance, hostile military alliance. It's analogous to the Warsaw Pact taking over Mexico and Canada. This kind of would be an analog, unthinkable. We'd have a nuclear war tomorrow, before instantly. But this is considered, and the Ukraine issue is related to that. If NATO were to extend further into Ukraine, that would be an enormous security threat. I mean, Russia's already very vulnerable, and unlike the United States, and surrounded by hostile powers, in fact, on all sides. And this would be a real serious security threat. So there are issues going way back. So going back to your point, yes, Crimea is a criminal act, but it's a lot more complex than that.